They came like a storm, armored, shouting, rifles drawn. But they stopped cold with 5 words from an old man whose hands were stained with grease. Welcome to Heartland Stories. I'm Ethan Hale, and here I share true stories about honor, kindness, and quiet strength. Today, I want to tell you about a man folks around here just knew as a mechanic. But one autumn afternoon, it turned out that behind his quiet life was a past powerful enough to stop an entire tactical team in its tracks. Want to hear how one man shut down a full SWAT unit without raising a hand or his voice? Then hit that like button, and let's begin. On Russell Street, the kind of place where flags hang from tidy porches and dogs keep lazy watch over the sidewalk, lived a man named Frank Elliott. He was 68, and around here, folks just called him the guy who could fix anything. His garage door was always up with the morning sun, and stayed that way until the last teenager from the local high school walked away with a lesson, not just in engines, but in decency. Frank started each morning the same way: black coffee strong enough to chew, classic rock on the radio, and the hum of old engines coming back to life. He didn't say much, just worked, focused, steady, with the kind of respect for tools you only get from someone who learned that precision isn't a skill. It's survival. There were no medals on his walls, no war stories at cookouts. No one on the street knew that 27 years ago, his name used to echo through corridors where the lights stayed off, that he'd been places where missions had no names and maps had no dates. That part of his life? Packed in an old shoebox and buried deeper than anyone could reach. Only Mary knew. With her, he didn't have to pretend. She stayed through the bad dreams, through the quiet breakdowns, through the long road back to becoming a man instead of a mission. Now, Frank built ramps for veterans on weekends, fixed the school bus on Tuesdays. His redemption was measured in oil stains and rust, scraped off slowly, like memories that might still be worth something. He didn't want recognition. He wanted peace. But peace is a fragile thing. And that fall afternoon, when the wind carried the first bite of cold metal and dying leaves, something cracked in the balance. And the past, well, the past came home. It started with a sound that didn't belong on Russell Street. Tires screeching too sharp, too sudden, like someone tearing silence in half. Then came the black SUVs. One after another, they swung into position with mechanical precision, blocking the street, chewing through grass and curbs like none of it mattered. Doors flew open, and men in black armor spilled out, faces hidden behind mirrored visors, movements crisp, rehearsed. This wasn't a visit. It was an operation. Only, it was the wrong address. Frank was under an old Chevy, changing oil as a favor for the neighbor across the way. The engine still ticked as he heard it. The low growl of engines replaced by footsteps. Not casual steps, tactical ones. Waited, practiced. He rolled out from under the car, propped himself up on his elbows, and froze. A rifle barrel stared back at him. Behind it, more men. Dozens. Then the shout. Police. On the ground. Now. Frank rose slowly. Hands open, palms out. Oil still dripping from his sleeves. This has to be a mistake, he said. But they weren't listening. A soldier motioned with his weapon. Down. Frank didn't argue. He understood how this worked. He knew what happened when you made the wrong move. He laid himself on the concrete, cheek pressed to the cold slab. Boots surrounded him. Then the zip of plastic. Tight, fast, final. His wrists were bound behind his back. Everything moved fast, like it was happening to someone else. No panic. Just a creeping cold. Not from the ground. From inside. Clear the house, a voice barked. Short. Sharp. Used to being obeyed. No one looked at Frank. No one asked a question. He wasn't a man anymore. He was part of the protocol. And then, the sound. The one Frank hoped he wouldn't hear. Tires again, slower this time. Brakes easing into place. Mary. Her old Camry rolled to a stop at the curb. He couldn't see her face. Didn't have to. He knew that rhythm. Door creaking open, 2 paper bags in her arms. Eggs. Apples. Milk. Just like she said she would. She walked casually. Until she saw the rifles. Frank? She called out. His name hung in the air like something that might still fix this. 3 armed men turned in unison. Drop the bags. Hands where we can see them. Mary froze. Bags clutched to her chest. Fingers white from gripping too tight. I'm I'm just bringing groceries." In that instant, Frank knew this wasn't a mistake anymore. It had become a threat. And all it would take now was one twitch, one shadow misread, one heartbeat too fast, and this would end in tragedy. He wanted to yell, wanted to stand, but the plastic cut into his wrists. A boot pressed hard into his back. "Back off, old man, or you're next," came a voice, sharp and reckless. And just like that, the whole world, the street, the air, the years narrowed to a single thing: dread. Mary froze, like she'd stepped into a scene where she didn't know her lines. 2 grocery bags in her arms, fingers trembling. The afternoon sun caught her silver hair, highlighting the fragility in her frame. Her lips moved slightly, like her mind was still catching up, still searching for words that hadn't come yet. "Ma'am, drop the bags." "Now." The voice was young, sharp, the kind of sharp that tries to cover its own uncertainty. She began to lower them. Slowly. Arthritis stiffened her hands, made them slow. The bags caught against each other. One arm dropped, the other hesitated. To someone watching through a scope, it looked wrong, looked like resistance. "She's not complying," shouted the same voice, cracking with adrenaline. Frank, still face down on the concrete, turned his head just enough to see the boy behind the voice. Too young, too tense. The kind of fear you don't feel in war, only in the moment before you make a mistake that can't be undone. The officer stepped forward, taser in hand. "Final warning." Mary tried to speak. "I'm just..." She didn't finish. Crack. A dry pop of electricity. Then the jolt. Her body seized. Arms snapping outward, legs buckling. The bags burst open. Eggs foaming on the pavement. Milk spilling like a slow ghost across the concrete. Apples rolled under boots. And Mary collapsed. No scream. No sound. Like someone had pulled her plug. Everything stopped. Even the static on someone's shoulder radio seemed to quiet. Frank didn't scream. Didn't roar in rage. He shifted. Just enough to raise his head. Just enough to be heard. His voice was low. Steady. But there was something in it. Something that made backs straighten before brains caught up. "Call General Cole. Right now." And in that silence, with milk soaking into the street, eggs cracked wide, and an old woman lying motionless, those 5 words hit like a command carved in stone. No one moved. But everything had changed. The team leader, a man in full tactical armor, hard-set features, and a mic rigged to his chin, froze for a split second. His eyes darted from Frank, still face down on the concrete, to Mary, motionless among spilled milk and broken eggshells. He took a step forward, like he wanted to say something, but the words didn't come. "Who the hell are you?" He muttered, quieter than a man in command should sound. Frank lifted his head. His eyes were steady, calm in a way that made panic look childish. "This is Russell Drive." "You want Russell Avenue," he said. No anger. No fear. Just fact. The way someone talks when they've earned the right to lead and simply chose not to use it. The commander blinked. His fingers twitched on the grip of his rifle. He turned to a soldier nearby. "Check the address." Somebody mumbled into their radio. A garbled voice came back. Tension slid through the team like static in the air, a string pulled too tight, about to snap. Frank spoke again. Still calm. Still firm. "Inside pocket of my jacket. Left side. Don't touch it. Just take it out slow." The commander gave a quick nod to an older soldier. Gloved hands reached in, unzipped the jacket. Out came a small metal tag, dark, worn, with a black eagle pressed into the face of a star. No name. No number. Just a mark. But for those who knew, that mark said everything. It wasn't an ID. It wasn't a badge. It was a whisper of something never said aloud. A pause. Not the quiet before calm, the quiet before reckoning. "Call General Cole." Immediately, Frank said again. And right then, everything that had been motion, threat, momentum froze. No one moved. The radio still hissed, but no one listened anymore. Frank, still on the ground, grease on his sleeves, dried blood at his hairline, wasn't just a man under arrest. He was the one holding control now. Not with force. Not with weapons. With 5 words. The commander held the tag in his hand like it might burn through his gloves. Small, heavy, a worn chunk of metal, dull with age but unmistakable in meaning. A black eagle. A star. No labels. Just history. He slowly turned, showed it to the nearest soldier, an older one, scarred along the neck, the kind who didn't learn about war from documentaries. The man's eyes widened. His lips moved, but no sound came. "Sir, that's black protocol," he muttered, like he was reminding himself it was real. "Tier 1. The real deal." The commander turned to Frank. Frank just nodded. A small dip of the head. No triumph. No challenge. Just confirmation. "Medic." The commander barked, this time not with command, with urgency. Panic, even. The medic rushed to Mary. Checked her pulse. Her pupils. The ambulance was already on the way, but this was more than vitals. Her eyes were open, clouded, still locked in the fog of pain and confusion. She whispered something broken, breathless. But Frank's name came through clear. The commander stood up, but something about him had shrunk. The armor on his body didn't protect him anymore, it weighed him down. He looked at Frank like a man who just stepped across a line he didn't know was there. The line between command and shame. Who the hell are you?" Frank slowly pushed himself up. One of the soldiers had already started cutting the zip ties. "I used to be someone who didn't exist," Frank said calmly. "Until I have to remind people I do." Across the street, someone held up a phone. Recording had already been going for a while, catching the moment an old man in oil-stained clothes, zip-tied and silent, spoke 5 words that made 20 armed men freeze. On the commander's shoulder, the radio blared. Someone shouting for updates, barking for answers. But he didn't respond, because the operation, all precision and planning, had just fallen apart. Not from resistance, from truth. "You hit the wrong house," Frank said, turning toward the team. "And the wrong man." Even the radios seemed to fall quiet, as if they understood. This wasn't just a mistake in coordinates. This was a failure in judgment. The commander, pale now, dropped his gaze, like he was searching the cracks in the pavement for something, anything, that could explain what had just happened. "We had intel, intelligence briefings," he started. His voice cracked. "We were told that it—" Frank raised a hand. "Free now. Calm." He didn't wave it like a threat, more like someone calling a conversation to a close. "You had authority," he said quietly, but it cut through the air sharper than any shout. Even the chatter on the radios died down. "You had authority, but no conscience. No yelling. No drama. Just a verdict. Plain. Final. Delivered without cruelty, but without room for excuse." Mary let out a faint moan. Frank dropped to his knees beside her in an instant. She tried to lift herself, but her eyes were unfocused, hands trembling. He took her hand, held it tight. Cold skin beneath his palm. "I'm here," he whispered. "You're okay. I've got you." The medic gave a nod. She was stable. She'd need checking over, but she'd live. Frank stood slowly, then helped Mary to her feet. Step by step, arm around hers, they made their way back toward the house. The garage door was still open, the workbench unchanged. Only now, a storm had passed through. As they walked, one of the younger officers, the same one who had once marched in with his weapon up, suddenly bent down. He picked up an apple that had rolled across the driveway, then a grocery bag, soaked through with spilled milk. He didn't look at Frank, didn't say a word. He just gathered what he could, carefully, quietly, like maybe, just maybe, it meant something to try. Across the street, a neighbor was still filming. Later, when a reporter asked him what he saw, he'd say, it was like a switch flipped. He said 5 words, and their eyes went hollow. Like shame came back. But for now, silence. Just the slow steps of Frank and Mary on the concrete path, and the hunched figures of men in armor, finally learning that a gun doesn't protect you from being wrong. And it sure as hell doesn't hide you from the truth. It didn't take long. Just enough time for the shouting over radios to fade into heavy silence. The team leader stood near the edge of the driveway, fists clenched at his sides, eyes locked on the far end of the street like he was waiting on judgment itself. The rest of the team shifted awkwardly, boots scuffing concrete. Their gear, once symbols of strength, now just hung on them like the weight of shame. And then he arrived. A black SUV, no lights, no markings, no urgency, turned slowly off the main road and rolled to a quiet stop behind the tactical trucks. The engine went still. Even the breeze seemed to pause. The man who stepped out wore a charcoal suit, perfectly pressed. He didn't rush. His stride was deliberate, measured. Silver hair trimmed to regulation perfection. A face carved from stone. He wore no insignia. Didn't need to. Anyone who saw him knew exactly what kind of man he was. The kind you didn't yell in front of. The kind you stood up for without being told. General James Cole. He didn't glance at the team. Didn't look at the commander. He walked straight toward the house, where Frank stood in the doorway, arm around Mary's shoulders. Their eyes met long before words did. They stopped 2 steps apart. Silence wrapped around them like something sacred. Only the crackle of a forgotten radio broke it. Cole raised his hand. A sharp, perfect salute. Frank hesitated. A second. Maybe 2. Then slowly, deliberately, he returned the gesture, his first in 15 years. They said you were dead, Cole said quietly. Just professionally, Frank replied. This wasn't conversation. This was history. Etched deep in their eyes, their lines, their silence. Cole's gaze shifted to Mary. She gave him the gentlest of smiles, woman to man, nothing formal about it. His jaw tightened. Just a flicker. Then he turned slowly to face the assembled team. And suddenly, the air felt heavy again. Like gravity had come back. What he was about to say didn't need volume. The weight of it was already there. Each word, when it came, would land like boots on glass. General Cole stood before the line of armed officers. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He spoke the way men do when they're used to being heard, without shouting. This man, he said, nodding toward Frank without even turning, wrote the very protocols you broke today. He's not a suspect. He's not a civilian. He's a national asset. A resource. One of the few whose work doesn't show up in briefings or reports, but you stand here today because he once stood where you couldn't. The team leader swallowed hard. Someone else looked down at the pavement. There was no anger in their faces. Just shame. The kind you can't cover with body armor. Cole stepped forward. Today, you didn't defend your country. You disgraced the uniform. And worse, you disrespected a man who's done more for this nation than most of you ever will in your entire careers. He turned to the young officer, the one who had pulled the trigger on the taser. The kid stood frozen, pale, hands shaking, like his whole world had just caved in. Step forward. The boy moved. No excuses. No words. He knew. He felt it. That moment when every ounce of bravado turns to soaked paper in the rain. Remove your gear. Now. He took off his vest, laid it gently across the hood of the nearest cruiser. Then his holster. His badge. His radio. Each movement, deliberate, heavy. He still wore the uniform, but somehow he didn't belong in it anymore. You're suspended. You'll come back, if you ever earn it. The kid said nothing. Just turned, walked to the squad car, and slid behind the wheel. Stared at the steering wheel like it was a verdict. Cole faced Frank now. Took a few steps closer. From inside his jacket, he pulled a thick white envelope. 2 documents inside. A formal apology from the agency. And full reinstatement of your clearance. We still need you, Frank. The world hasn't gotten any safer. We need someone who can hold the silence, while others give in to the noise. Frank looked at the envelope. Didn't take it. The world doesn't change, James, he said quietly. Just the weapons. And the uniforms. He glanced toward the porch. Mary stood there, pale but upright. He nodded in her direction. My duty's here now. With her. And with the ones who need an engine turned over, not bullets flying. Cole nodded. No argument. No pressure. He stepped forward and gently set the envelope on the porch rail. The offer stands, he said. Then turned and walked away. The sun was low now, sinking behind the trees. And the shadow of the porch fell across a bulletproof vest. Left without an owner. 1 week after the incident, the town mayor stood at the podium. Flags flanked both sides. Behind him, the police chief clutched a sheet of paper, jaw tight. Cameras clicked. Microphones buzzed. But the room was still. Today, the chief began. We're announcing a new mandatory training for every officer in this department. It's called the 5 Words Protocol. It's about knowing the difference between a threat and fear. It's about learning when to stop and think. No names were mentioned. They didn't need to be. The neighbor's video of a grease-stained old man calmly speaking 5 words that made a team of armed professionals lower their weapons had already gone viral. They tried scrubbing it from the net. But the internet remembers. Frank didn't watch the broadcast. He was in the garage, scrubbing rust off his hands, scraping grime from a carburetor. Behind him, in the yard, Mary watered the flowers. Life didn't return to what it was. It moved forward, a little heavier, a little stronger. On Russell Street now, patrol cars slowed near Frank's driveway. Not to check in. Out of respect. Officers nodded first. Sometimes with a subtle touch to the brow, the kind of salute that didn't come from rank, but from recognition. Frank wasn't looking for attention. He just kept doing what he knew best. Fixing what was broken. Not always with tools. Sometimes, just by being the kind of man who didn't give in to fear. The sun beat down hard that afternoon, and the pavement shimmered with heat. An old Crown Vic sat at the curb with its hood up. A young cadet stood over the engine, stiff in a too-new uniform, his face caught somewhere between worry and shame. He already knew whose street this was. Frank appeared like he always did, quiet, unnoticed, until he was right there. In a worn work suit, wrench in hand. Not smiling. Not cold. Just there. He leaned in, took one glance. "Fuel line's clogged," he said. "Give me 15 minutes. The cadet nodded. No small talk. No wasted movement. They worked side by side. Frank showed him. The kid followed. The engine roared back to life like a dog that just needed someone to trust. They stood there a moment, closing the hood. Quiet. Then, hesitantly, the cadet asked, "Sir, back at the academy, they talk about what happened that day. They say you could have ruined careers with one sentence. Why didn't you?" Frank wiped his hands on a rag. Tossed it into the toolbox. "Revenge doesn't fix engines," he said. "Doesn't fix people either." The kid nodded. Slowly. The kind of nod that didn't come from lectures, but from life. "Thank you, sir." Frank turned to walk back to the garage. And over his shoulder, he said, "It's just Frank." It happened outside the local VFW post, an old building, sun-faded and quiet, the kind with a handwritten sign on the door and the smell of coffee brewed more out of habit than taste. Frank was stepping out after a meeting when she caught him, a young reporter with a determined microphone and a hunger for one more soundbite from the story that had already swept across the country. "Mr. Elliott," she called, appearing from behind a parked car, "can you tell us why you didn't fight back that day? You had the training. The right. Why only 5 words?" He stopped. Didn't answer right away. Behind dusty glasses, his eyes met hers. Not irritated. Just tired. The kind of tired that comes from not needing to prove anything anymore. "Because they were louder than fear," he said. "Because strength isn't when you push someone to the ground. It's when you're on the ground and still know who you are." She tried to ask more, but he went on softer this time. "Because standing your ground doesn't always mean striking first. Sometimes it just means staying human, even when the world forgets what that looks like." He nodded politely, walked past her, and headed toward his pickup truck parked by the curb. In the bed, a toolbox, an old gas can, and a rolled-up newspaper he used to kneel on when working under cars. He didn't know if his words would make the air. Didn't matter. He said them for the ones who still listen, even when the world's too loud to hear. If you were moved by the story of a man who once was a weapon and chose instead to become a shelter, like this video, subscribe. We don't just tell stories. We give voice to those who speak softly, but say what truly matters. See you next time.